This is a note PowerPoint presentation on Santa Clarita Valley water. Go ahead and fill in your note sheets while I talk through each slide. In Santa Clarita Valley, we have two sources for our water. One source is the Santa Clara River, and the other source is the California Aqueduct. So the Santa Clara River is in this picture. Now this is a picture of the river when it has a lot of water, and our river does not always have a lot of water. It has more water closer to the ocean, like through Fillmore and Piru, and less water up in Santa Clarita. However, when it rains, we do have more water at that point in time. The second source of our water is the California Aqueduct, and depending on the year, it's about half from each source. The Santa Clara River begins in Acton, and we call that the Headwaters. And it begins when rainwater runs off into little creeks, and all those little creeks come together and begin the river. And our river flows about 100 miles to the Pacific Ocean, and it enters the Pacific Ocean between Oxnard and Ventura. And there's a state beach there. Sometimes people can go camping at the location of where this enters the ocean. So the riverbed is dry up here in Santa Clarita for most of the year, but when we get rain, it will fill up and we'll have surface water. And you can kind of see on this picture here the surface water, and those are my own two kids collecting water samples a couple of years ago. Now the water is very dark at this picture because we had just had a bunch of rain that had washed burned area into the river, and so the river was full of black ash actually when we went out there and collected some water samples. A lot of the riverbed is dry, as you can see from the bottom picture, but when rainwater comes and it drains into the river, it soaks underground, and so we have our aquifers under the river that fill up. Here's a pumping station in the riverbed, and so underground in the aquifers, we have a lot of water that we pump up and we treat, and we send it to people's homes. And there's a close-up sign. So this particular pumping station is property of the Newhall County Water District. So in Santa Clarita, we have several different water districts. They're all billed through a joint company called SCV Water, but we have different water districts that serve different neighborhoods. So after you have your water in your house, it goes through sewer pipes and it goes to the wastewater treatment plant over by Magic Mountain and the 5 freeway and the old road. So here's the 5 freeway here. That's the old road. This is Magic Mountain, and so in between that right here is the Valencia Reclamation Plant. It cleans the wastewater that goes down our drains and dumps the clean water into the river. And so at this point of the riverbed, we have surface water year-round because we're constantly flushing toilets and taking showers and putting water into the wastewater treatment plant, which is running 24 hours a day, cleaning water and releasing it into the river. So this is the picture of the watershed. So the whole area here drains into the river. So first whenever it rains, it drains into creeks and streams, and then they flow into the Santa Clara River. And so this is how it flows. We are right about here in the watershed. And then the river here is in blue, and you can see how it travels to the ocean. Here's another picture of the watershed. So these colored areas are everywhere that drains into the Santa Clara River. And so the Santa Clara River is actually not shown here, but I will draw it in for you. It kind of goes all right here. and it kind of goes like this. And then here's our city, Santa Clarita. And so all of this area, if a drop of rain hits in any of these areas, it flows into the river. And so we call that a watershed. We have a few different endangered species in our river. The most famous one is the unarmored three-spined stickleback fish. And it's a very long name. It's actually a subspecies. And it's endemic, which means it's only found in this river. Another one is the western toad, and then we have other endangered species. This is a wild river. So our Santa Clara River is wild, which means it's uncemented, and it's listed as an endangered river because it's one of the last wild rivers. The picture here is of the LA River, so not us, but if you've ever driven down to LA and you've seen the Los Angeles River, here you might not even known it was a river. You might have thought it was a drainage ditch. And so a long time ago, Los Angeles decided to prevent flooding, like during El Niños, by cementing the sides of the river. And so they took a wild river and turned it into that concrete. They are reversing some of this because it's not the best thing. It's ugly, and you don't get to save a lot of rainwater when it does rain because it just flows off into the ocean. It doesn't percolate down. So Los Angeles is actually revitalizing and removing the cement from certain portions of the LA River to try and revitalize the river. The second source of our water is the California Aqueduct. Now, back in the 60s, with a governor named Edmund Brown, who is Jerry Brown's dad, he spearheaded, and of course it was approved by the state legislature, the State Water Project. And it funded the California Aqueduct and other water parts, water aqueducts and dams and things in the state of California. And so the first part of that project happens way up in the Sierra Nevada mountains, where you have melted snowpack that melts into rivers. So it melts into the Feather and Sacramento rivers. And those rivers flow into the Sacramento River Delta, which then is pumped into this aqueduct. So an aqueduct is a man-made river. And it flows down the Central Valley into Southern California. If you drive up the 5 freeway north towards Sacramento, you can see the this aqueduct. And it is an open air aqueduct. I don't know why, except it was probably cheaper to build it that way. Now, part of that aqueduct is diverted into Pyramid and Castaic lakes, which are nearby to us. And and evaporation occurs. One of the issues with reservoirs is that you have this big open water here, which can evaporate, and you can lose some of your water supply that way. From Castaic Lake and Pyramid Lake, the water is then pumped to the treatment plant. So if you did the summer assignment at the Castaic Lake Water Agency, which now they're calling SCV Water, you toured the water treatment plant there. And then from the water treatment plant, it goes to your home. So here's the path of the water. So again, this is half of our water comes from the California Aqueduct. So up here is the melted snowpack, and it goes into these rivers way up here at the top, the Feather River, the Sacramento River. And up here there's also a dam called the Oroville Dam, which we'll talk about in a minute. And those rivers flow into the Sacramento River Delta, which is this area here. From the delta, it's pumped into the aqueduct, which is this dark blue line. And so then the water flows down the aqueduct, and then we get this little diversion here. So that's diverted over to Pyramid and Castaic Lakes, and then it continues on its way south. So one of the issues with the Oroville Dam is in 2017, during an El Nino event, it rained and snowed so hard that the dam almost broke. And if you would like to see a couple of pictures of that, go to these links and you can see some pictures and a little video of what happened. And they had to evacuate thousands, maybe even 1 million people below the dam. Another issue is the delta smelt, which is an endangered fish that lives in the Sacramento River Delta. In 2017, courts ruled that they had to reduce the amount of pumping into the delta because of this endangered fish. The farming industry, the agricultural industry in California was not pleased with this because they had less water to grow crops, which means less jobs, and however, it is an endangered species. So a lot of these endangered species decisions are not, they're complicated and there's people involved, and they're not always cut and dry. Another really interesting thing, and I encourage you to click on the link, is to look at shade balls in some of LA's reservoirs. And the reason why I have this slide here is because when you travel south out of Santa Clarita on the 5 freeway, as soon as you leave Santa Clarita and you get down more towards LA, on the right hand side is a big reservoir. It looks like a lake and it's covered in black balls. And if you click on that link, you can take a look at that. It's pretty interesting. In through Santa Clarita, we have an aqueduct that's not our aqueduct. So running through Santa Clarita, it runs by the S Hill at Saugus High. It flows, it also runs next to the Walmart on Golden Valley, and also by the bowling alley as well. And this is the Los Angeles Aqueduct, and it carries water for LA City, not Santa Clarita. So it flows through Santa Clarita, but is not our water in Santa Clarita. It was built in 1913 by William Mulholland for LA City, and basically at this time, LA City needed more water, and so somebody said to William Mulholland, who was the water supervisor at the time, said, you know, there's this big old river up on the other side of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and let's take that river and let's send it to Los Angeles. Those people up there, they don't need that river. Well, actually they did. There was a lot of farmers up there that used that river water for their orchards. So they built the aqueduct. They actually swindled the farmers out of their water rights, and that's another big old story. And so the farmers became very angry because they were swindled basically out of their farms because without water they couldn't grow anything. And so they would blow up the pipeline. And so after several times that the pipeline got blown up and water just sort of spilled all over everywhere and didn't make it to the city, they realized that they had to build some dams to store water in case the pipeline was blown up further up the pipe, more towards the Mammoth area. So this is a great link. You should click on this one and watch the story of the St. Francis Dam. because it tells about that they built this dam just on the outskirts of Santa Clarita, and the dam burst. So, here's more of the story. So, as I was saying, the farmers in the Owens Valley sold their water rights, and some were swindled out of their water rights. And they used to blow up the pipe out of vengeance, and they built the St. Francis Dam up San Francisco Canyon Road to hold the water. And so there's a picture of the dam when it was complete. It was only completely filled with just a little bit of time, maybe a week or less, and then it burst. And there was a wall of water that went through all of Santa Clarita. Now, there weren't very many people living in Santa Clarita at the time, maybe just a handful, maybe 2,000-3,000, I'm guessing, but not a lot in 1928, and 450 people were killed. And the bodies were swept into the Santa Clara River and out towards the ocean.